Thanks everyone for joining us. This is another episode of No Power Panel. I'm one of your hosts, Noam.
And I'm his cousin Isaac.
Our other great host. And this is going to be our final time talking before Election Day on April the 28th. We're past the debates, we're past all of the platforms having been launched, and now we're going straight into the final stretch of campaigning before Election Day. And the next time we'll be sitting down together, Isaac, will be the day after the election, when we'll be going over results and takeaways and all of that kind of thing. But for now, we're going to do our last edition of Horse Race Disco before the election day. We're going to go over some of the most recent updates in some polling because we do actually have a little bit of key movement in some areas to talk about this time, as opposed to the flat race we've had the last couple of weeks. Still
Yeah,
relatively flat, but um, a little bit of movement. We're going to talk about uh, what our predictions are for the results. We'll each say where we think seat counts will end up and where we think vote percentages might end up based on what we're looking at right now. We're going to touch on the official platform releases that we've seen all of the parties hold in the last week since the debate. And then we're going to talk a little bit about a not really an election issue that's come up, but something that does provide a little bit of intrigue into some of the election stories, which of course involves the death of Pope Francis and whether we think that Mark Carney should take some time off the campaign this weekend to attend the funeral as Canada's official representative as Prime Minister, and if we think he will, and maybe those answers aren't the same, or maybe they will be. We'll see. While we're on that subject, we should say that although we aren't Catholic, we're not Christian ourselves, we do extend our sympathies to everyone who is mourning right now. Pope Francis certainly uh, led quite an interesting life. And there's a lot of people who feel very impacted by his passing. And in that spirit, Isaac, we're going to end off in the way that we often do, by sharing a message of to take into this next week. And I thought it would be appropriate that this week we'll be sharing Pope Francis's last speech, his Easter speech from this past weekend, and I have will be reading out just the last couple of paragraphs that I'll read out on behalf of that. So, moving straight then into our first segment, which is Horse Race Disco. If
where
anyone
now
has any
this
suggestions of some disco music that would be considered fair use, let us know, because so far everything I've tried hasn't worked.
we might just have to go into like those like sample like free music sample disco something.
Yeah, something
Uh,
like that.
so this week on Horse Race Disco, the long-awaited tightening may have happened. It's not that dramatic. It's not that. It's not. I don't think enough to really change the state of who's going to win the most seats. But possibly now, there's actually a realistic chance, I think, that the Liberals won't get a majority when maybe a week ago it was looking very, very, very likely that they would. Now we can maybe actually have the discussion, what do they need to do to get to that path for a majority?
Mhm.
And because I don't think it's for certain, definitely. And
Not
so
looking that way
and it seems to be a combination of overall like the bloc improving a little bit in Quebec, which will eat into some of those liberal seats, and just maybe
Certainly, like
1 or 2 points nationwide tightening between the conservatives and liberals, and that might be enough to take that away. Yeah.
absolutely. So that means that like seats like the one that I live in Perth Wellington in Ontario, that was looking like it might be starting to miraculously flip to red after I think 40 years of conservative representation. Um are are now maybe with some of this tightening looking like there's some conservative strength coming back in. I will notice just anecdotally uh, that that does seem to be happening in my community. There's been an increase of conservative presence. The conservative signs have been going up much quicker. Um, there's like you see the conservative campaign walking around, which wasn't happening up until the last week or so. And so that's definitely, I think, having some kind of an impact. But I also like the block numbers, I think probably are more in the way of the liberals getting to that majority. In combination, I would also say with the NDP looking like it might be gaining a little bit back in BC, that's not nowhere close to where they were in 2021 or 2019. Um, but that extra couple of percentage points might make
Well,
it so that some seats in Vancouver that might have been looking red might end up staying orange. Some seats on Vancouver Island that might have been looking to flip conservative might now be staying orange. So that might also impact the conservatives out there. But certainly, I think the liberal path that looked like they were going to be able to get a majority with almost just Atlantic Canada, Quebec, and Ontario, if the block numbers hold, the Quebec part of that equation probably gets reduced by, I've seen about 10 seats being talked about
yeah.
as were red a week ago and are now looking more block. And
Well,
that means that the Liberals have to gain that up somewhere else.
let's hammer that down. I'm on the
Mm-hmm.
338's Quebec breakdown. And if we're
Okay.
just going based on 338's aggregate, on April 8th, so 2 weeks ago, when the Liberals were at their peak in Quebec, um, they were projected 49 seats and the Bloc 16. And
Mm-hmm.
now, 2 weeks later, there's no change in that conservative seat count. It stays flat at 12. But now the bloc is projected at 23 seats and the Liberals 42. So a swing of about 7 seats to the bloc from the Liberals. And if we look at the overall swing from the Liberals' peak, so at their peak, the Liberals were projected of to get around 196 seats and now 185. So it's an 11 seat swing from that like mean value, and 7 of them are coming from Quebec. So it is
Yeah.
like majority this like Quebec movement that's showing up in the national numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I think that we should be clear that at this point, it doesn't look like the Liberals are in any danger of not having the most seats at this point. Even in the modeling that I was looking at today that showed, okay, what would it look like if the Conservatives won by 2 points in the popular vote? It was
Mhm.
still a liberal plurality at that point. The Conservatives have to be at least 3 points ahead in the popular vote nationally in order to likely be ahead in the seat count. And even that would just be a very narrow conservative minority,
Yes.
which, given the way Polyev acts and his attitude towards the opposition leaders, I don't see a conservative minority government under Polyev being able to survive very long at
Yeah,
all.
there's in the past there's been some idea that like a bloc could support a conservative government, but based on, energy and pipelines and how he's already been kind of antagonistic towards Blanchet, I don't see it kind of happening in this specific makeup.
I
Definitely the
agree,
NDP.
especially if Blanchette is able to gain a little bit of momentum back from liberal supporters. And you have to then imagine he's looking at his coalition going, okay, I have to keep the progressive wing happy to keep the numbers as high as maybe they are or will be on election day at this point.
And one more point, just to talk about this, what we're talking about, the chance the Conservatives get a plurality. So we're seeing virtually impossible they could get a majority. I don't see, no one's projecting it. We have a few
Something
aggregates.
wild would have to happen in Ontario.
Yeah, and 7.3 million people have already voted.
Yeah,
So huge
it's
things
not
have to
happening.
happen. And the Conservatives, if we look at the two, we can do an aggregate of aggregates, I guess. So 338 is one aggregate. They have their own methodology. CBC's poll tracker is another aggregate. They have their own methodology. So poll tracker is giving a 5% chance of Conservatives getting the most seats, and 338 is giving a 7% chance. So right around the same amount. Like, there is a chance. It's just out of that two standard deviations, bridge where we say like likely scenario, one standard deviation is like 66%, two standard deviations is 95%. It's like, it's almost at the point where we can say almost certain from very likely, but it is 5%. That is a realistic, it's big enough to show up on models. So.
And certainly that's grown from a 1% a week ago. Right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
If you're talking about trajectory and momentum, certainly the things are on the Conservative side in terms of that. The Conservative ad strategy in the last couple of days has been really fascinating.
Can we talk about the ad?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to do, because and I think it still fits in horse race disco, because it's about the horse race. But that, I just want to, for a moment, say
give some background first on the
yeah,
ad
exactly.
strategy. Post that.
So what we saw for the past number of years, really, from the Conservatives in their ad strategy has been all Poilievre all the time. He's been featured in every ad. Every ad has been about him. It's been very, very heavily focused on that. In the last couple of days, the Conservatives have pulled their Poilievre ads off of the air, and they have put up two new ads. One of which is an ad featuring former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, essentially endorsing Pierre Poilievre and making the point that he's endorsing Pierre Poilievre despite having worked closely during his prime ministership with Mark Carney as the then governor of the Bank of Canada.
And when Mark Carney I just want to make one quick point on this. That Harper, there's clips going around that I think the Liberals haven't been using enough. They're saying, if you're going to use Harper, we can use Harper too. There's clips of Harper basically saying Carney's the best thing since sliced bread. He deserves every accolade he could possibly get. When he left Canada to go to the Bank of England, there's a Harper standing in the House of Commons saying like he's our greatest export ever. Any country would be lucky to have him. He's amazing. So like the Liberals should get on those clips.
They should. I wonder if the reason that they haven't been as
they
much
don't want
pushing them out there is they don't want to spook the NDP supporters who remember the Harper years and go, oh, I don't want somebody that Harper describes as an ally.
Harper was still extremely unlikable at the end of his,
Harper brutally lost the 2015 election. Like, it was one of the worst defeats of an incumbent prime minister that we've ever seen, frankly.
And before we get too much into the content of these ads, I just want to mention too that like during the hockey playoffs, you can't get away from these. Like they're timing their ad spend and their money. They have huge war chests, and they know there's going to be a lot of eyes actually on screen. Traditional media, it plays into the actual base that they're targeting, which is older voters. With these ads specifically, they're both targeting older voters.
Mhm.
And two, they're playing them on traditional media hard all the time, every commercial break. And there's actually eyes on traditional media right now, even more, even with some younger people, because hockey, you have to watch it live. You're not watching that on YouTube the next day. And it's getting, obviously it's the playoffs. There's a lot of Canadian teams in the playoffs this year.
It's
It's
millions
getting
and
huge amounts.
millions of viewers.
Yeah.
Mhm. Um, the second ad that they have put out there, that I would say, judging just on the amount that we're seeing it, the ad spend must be much higher on this second one than on the Harper one. And
Mm-hmm.
what it is, and I've been wanting to talk to you about
Yeah.
this because I want to get your thoughts on it, because I don't quite know what I think of it. It's because, so let's describe what it is, and then we'll kind of share where we're at with it. What it is it's two men who are in their late 50s, early 60s, we could say, um, talking about playing golf and talking about the election, and the current
And the
state
economy.
of, yeah, the current state of the Canadian economy. So one of them mentions that he and his wife just put a down payment on a house for one of their children. The other guy
Can I
briefly
make a
says,
point
"Well, you
on?
know what Mark Carney says," and then the first guy very quickly interrupts and says, "Yeah, but these liberals have been in power for the past 10 years, and they've whatever been screwing things up, and are we really going to trust them with a fourth term with another 4 years? um and I'm voting conservative this time." And then the other guy looks thoughtfully at him and agrees. That's essentially the ad that they have put what must be millions of dollars in their war chest behind this ad, with the amount that it's getting run.
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts on this ad. One, I think it's like gonna be the defining ad of the campaign. It's like the only ad that's really getting like traction in terms of like media coverage, people talking about it, people on social media talking about it a lot. Um, there's a couple things that I think why. So yeah, as you said, they've completely dropped Polyev. Polyev's not mentioned, and at the end, it doesn't even say vote conservative, vote Polyev's conservatives. It just says vote conservative with the conservative logo. That's obviously a strategic choice based on Polyev's favorables right now. Everyone who likes Polyev is already voting for conservative. They know that. The people they're trying to convert, the Conservative Party is pulling ahead of Polyev's favorables, right? So it's like they need to pull in people who might be sympathetic to the conservative brand, but don't like Polyev. People who might have voted Harper, and that's the Harper ad, and people who just meet a certain demographic who historically might have voted conservative and now support the liberals. I when I originally watched this ad, I thought it was a parody as I was watching it until the end when it said vote conservative. I thought it was a parody of Out of Touch Carney supporters. I knew that when they eventually said like I'm gonna vote conservative, then I was like, wait, this isn't what I thought it was. I thought they were mocking Carney supporters for younger people. I thought this was an ad originally from me targeted at that angry youth who can't afford a house, who can't afford rent, are mad at all the boomers voting liberals who have like gotten us into this housing crisis. That's what I thought the ad was. When he says, "Oh, the economy is pretty rough. Last year we had to put a down payment on my kid's house." It's like, what? That's so out of touch. You're saying that the economy is hard. You had to buy your daughter a house. It's like it doesn't make any sense. That's why it's like, what do these people know about the economy being rough? They're at a driving range. That was my But then as the ad goes on and they're actually saying they're going to
I
support,
watched it.
I'm surprised.
Mhm. No, I had the exact same reaction. And then what happened was I listened to other coverage of this ad and talking about who the target audience for it was, and that they were actually like that they're actually trying to target guys like these guys in the ad, and that becomes clear as you watch the ad. But even so, the first time I went, oh, this is a what, huh?
Yeah.
and
Maybe it's
so
not for us,
then
so maybe we can't relate. It
maybe
will
it's not
play
for us,
well.
but this
If we're
is
gonna play
but
it
so
well,
this
it
is
must
my
have-
question. So this is my question about this ad. Is it actually for anyone? Does this ad actually do what they're intending it to do? Because the way that I look at it is these older men who have gone from the conservatives to the liberals and have driven this election, really. And I do agree with you that I think that this is the defining ad of the campaign, because I think it really represents the voters who are ultimately making this decision. Um, but I thought, but like I was like, there's a third character missing here. There's a character missing here who exists when these conversations are happening in real life, who is there to say, but guys, what about Trump?
Mhm,
Right? And
mhm.
I felt like the liberals could have put out this exact same ad up until the very end and introduced that third guy, that, or had one of these two guys have the what about Trump moment. What are things going to look like a year from now? That actually really plays into the liberals' hands. And I thought that I think that ignoring that question the way that the conservatives are trying to in that ad, the older men like this that I know who aren't already die in the wood Polyev guys are going to look at this kind of ad and go, okay, but there's an entire section missing here, right? Like, I don't think it's actually persuasive in the way that they are thinking it is. Now, maybe what it does is some turnout driving for them, does do some of that youth stuff that you were talking about just inherently, and also gets people who are these kinds of older guys who are still in the conservative camp, motivates them. But I think that the guys who are like these men in the ad and have already decided to vote liberal, and that the conservatives are trying to persuade back, I don't think that they're looking at this ad going, this is this is a way to actually get their votes. Maybe they agree with most of what's said in the ad, but at the end of the day, like, all the liberals have to do is slap a Mark Carney logo on that ad, and it works as a Liberal Party of Canada ad, right?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't actually distinguish in any way. It doesn't actually do anything for these
Mhm.
voters, right? Like, it just shows them being like, yeah, how are we going to vote? And deciding to vote conservative. But these men all have friends who are already doing that, right? Like, this
Yeah.
doesn't do anything to
Yeah.
change the conversation that is already happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's an ad that makes arguments that have already been baked in to the electorate while they're
Yeah.
making this decision.
Yeah.
So that's my thought on that ad. Then again, we are seeing a little bit of conservative uptick in the polls since these ads have started. So it's very possible that we are not the target demographic, and that maybe they do have that kind of 1-2% bounce with them that
Yeah.
helps them keep the liberals to a minority, like we've been talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I don't know if we can prescribe, any one change to like this, polling Uh, um, change, I don't
No.
know if it's enough either way, and we also don't know timing, right? Like they launched this ad about 3 days ago, and the poll's coming out now. Like there's like that like soak period of like things to like actually like melt into an electorate, and like I don't know how many people saw the ad the first day it was released to even show up in the polls, So I don't know how much we can say.
No, absolutely. I think what we can probably say is that this isn't going to hurt them,
Yeah,
right? Like this probably does have only upsides, and I think that it's probably that it has very limited upsides in the end. But this feels to me um like a move that they needed to make to get to some of these voters, but
yeah,
also like they're still not running this campaign the way
yeah,
that they need to. They're still not running this campaign like they are 5 to 7 points behind at all times.
yeah,
And that's why they're losing, right? They're losing because they haven't done the kind of dramatic um pitches that they almost would need to break up what otherwise has just been a very steady polling election.
yeah.
Um I think
Yeah,
that probably go ahead.
no, I was gonna say like they're trying everything they can, right? They're throwing everything at the wall, and they have a shit ton of money to do it. So they got to spend that money, and they're not in the position they thought they would be in at this point when they were raising all that money, and they can't run the type of campaign they wanted to raise. So if we want to wrap up horse race disco, maybe we could
Mhm.
talk about the platforms, if you're good to do that too.
Yeah,
Because I think
absolutely.
that plays right into what I was going to say about the conservatives this campaign. I think they originally planned to run the campaign as the front runners. And I think that meant, like
Oh,
Doug Ford does, not really releasing a platform. Like we're way out ahead. We don't have to do anything. We're not taking media availability. Instruct all the MP, in this case, MP candidates, to not do debates. This is what Doug Ford did in the Ontario election. Don't go to debates.
mhm.
Don't take questions. Don't allow media access. Say don't don't f it up. Like like do everything
They're
possible to
still
not
running a front runner, but they're
that
still
can ruin your.
running this campaign,
Yeah,
right? Like
exactly, and
this is what's confusing is they're not throwing everything at the wall the way that they
yeah,
need to be. They're
and
still running a front runner campaign that isn't actually working.
And when you look at conservative campaigns where they've lost them, it's bad like moments. It happened in Alberta when Notley won. It happened. It's like when you're ahead and the electorate is supportive. Generally, it's like you're supposed to limit any controversy. And with the conservatives, there can be a lot of controversy because you have some crazy candidates who say wild things, and they have associations to, like, in my opinion, like unsavory, beliefs.
Mhm.
So it's like
Yeah.
you have to shut that all down and basically not go out there. Same thing with the budget. All that happens when you not the budget, the platform. All that happens when you pull out a
Mhm.
platform, honestly, is like you open yourself up to get picked apart. Like, your math doesn't add up. You're spending too much. You're not spending enough. You're cutting services. Where's the money going to go for healthcare? You're opening yourself up to all these questions. You don't release a platform. Yeah, maybe a few people. If you are the front runner, you do that calculus and you say, okay, like people are already supporting us. They don't need the platform to like push us over the edge. But if you aren't the front runner, you need to seem serious. You need to seem, and you need to release a platform more than 6 days before the election and after 7.3 million people voted. So
Yeah. Well, and especially like I just scanned through the conservative platform right before we started recording. And I don't think I could find anything in it that had already not been announced.
Yeah.
Um it's very, very light. It's incredibly just like a couple of their key announcements thrown together, and that's effectively what it presents as. It's
Yeah, it's not.
not it's not the kind of like in-depth governing plan that I think Polyev probably does actually have, right? Like, say what you want about Polyev, and we've certainly said lots about him today and in previous episodes, but he's not a stupid man. He's not a
Mhm.
man who doesn't have stuff that he wants to get done. He has core beliefs that he has held for his entire political career, that there are things that he wants to achieve and accomplish, and he's ended up not being able to actually unload in that kind of way on this election campaign, in an effort to try to appeal to as many people as possible, from a position of relative weakness. Um, and so this platform reads like that. It reads like a party that knows that it's in trouble, but also is too scared to try to fight it out, right? To try to dig itself out of that trouble. It would rather win the like 115 to 125 seats that they're pretty much guaranteed at this point than try to do anything radical to win an extra 50 on that, but potentially costs them 20 to 30 from that if things go bad.
Mhm.
And that's how their platform reads. Um, which is fine. It's designed that way, evidently. Um, but there's nothing really game changing in there, and there's nothing that they haven't already been talking about for years at this point in there.
Yeah, the platform's about 30 pages. Four of them are full page images. Like there's like
Mhm.
20 images in it, It's extremely light. But that tends to be that's how you avoid any any scrutiny is you don't put
Oh yeah.
anything in your
Well,
platform.
I remember. Yeah, I remember my first platform that I had to read when I was involved with the NDP at a riding level, um, which was for the 2011 provincial campaign. And it was like the pages were about that big, like
Mm.
a quarter of the size of a normal page, to make the
Yeah,
book seem thicker.
yeah, yeah.
And then it was full of pictures and graphics and designs. And I remember flipping through this going, okay, so they don't really want to say very much. And that's the feeling from this conservative platform as well.
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of how politics is, not
It's become standard, is kind of the
yeah,
point I'm
like
trying to make.
not everyone's as wonky as us in the electorate. Like, we kind of devolved to the point where that's what's like expected. It's like they've optimized these strategies in such a way to like minimize risk. And it's like that is what it is. It's like you have to balance how many people actually are going to read like a full detail costed platform. Yeah, not many. And the worst you can have is like media then like pulls apart your math. So it's like, well, avoid doing the math at all because then they won't write articles
Yeah.
on it. The more you actually give them meat, the more it's like people actually like consume that information through the media. And all the media is looking for during a campaign is like gotcha moments. So it's like avoid them being able to get them. Like one article saying like the platform's not substantive is a lot better than having like $1 billion of like money unaccounted for, or they're gonna cut spending to healthcare and education. It's like okay, you'd rather have like a offside mention of like the platform isn't very substantive versus like article
Yeah.
after article, like breaking down how you're going to cut spending on social services.
Mhm. No, exactly. Whereas the NDP and liberal platforms were slightly more substantial, covered a couple of more areas, but even they were very light on details as well.
And even with the liberal platform, there's already like a small news cycle starting of, you know, they're going to spend. And, you know, the conservatives are trying to attack them. Oh, it's the Trudeau platform of spend and, you know, raise deficits, and they're going to have big deficits. It's all that same scare tactics. When in reality, a lot of the spending has shifted from operations funding to capital funding, and it's about like, you know, investments rather than operations, but like, which is actually stuff the conservatives have pushed for in the past, but none of that matters
Absolutely.
on the top line for them. So
No, 100. You can tell Carney's a banker when you read the liberal platform. Um,
mhm.
and I mean that in both a positive and a negative way, right? Like it's a lot of the things that a banker would tell you to do to maximize your fiscal situation.
Yeah,
Should we get into predictions?
yeah, let's do some predictions.
All right. So first of all, let's go with popular vote first.
Okay, do you want me
Where
to
do you
start?
think people are going to fall on popular vote? Yeah.
Okay, I believe that I think the NDP vote will collapse more because we've seen it happen in past elections.
Mhm.
And I even saw it recently in the Toronto election. It's like when you have a front runner against someone who's viewed as the right wing, the left, I don't know how much more it can collapse, but the left does coalesce. So the NDP range right now is about like 7 to 11% on 338. I'm going to take the lower end. I think it's going to be probably closer to 7%, 7 or 8%. So
All
that's
right.
where I think NDP is going to end up. I think the conservatives are going to outperform a little bit their current polling just because they always seem to. If I look back at the like last couple elections, they have a shit ton of money and they have a very good ground game. And I don't think that'll be any different. So I'm going to say conservatives at 40%, and I'm gonna go liberals at 45%. So liberals 45%, conservatives 40%, NDP 7, Bloc 6, Green 2, everyone else. That's my prediction for percents. And then in terms of seat count, I think the NDP like being weaker might will help the liberals. So I'm gonna go with liberals at 190 seats. Oh, do you want to do percent first, or am I doing both? And then
Yeah, I'll do percent first. Yeah.
you go percent, and
Okay.
then we'll do seat.
All right. So I have a slightly different take. Um, which is that I think that um things are gonna be things are gonna stay relatively close to where we see them in a lot of ways. I think the conservatives are probably gonna outperform a little bit because they often do. So I have the liberals at 43, the conservatives at 40, the NDP at 8, the bloc I have at 5. I think the bloc I have a feeling the bloc surge is gonna fall a little bit back to home. Once people start getting a little concerned that could mean a conservative plurality. Um, and then I have the Greens at 2, the PPC at 2, and everyone else at or sorry, the PPC
PPC
at
at
1.
2. Okay, I was
No, I
gonna
have the
say you're
PPC
really.
at 1. No, I have the PPC at 1, and I have everybody else then totaled at 1. So 43-40, 43 to 40 versus you had 45 to
40.
to
40 I still have. Yeah, so
Okay,
I
so you
had
still
2
had them
points
at
higher. I had 2 points higher for the Liberals, 1 point lower for the NDP, and 1 point higher.
Yeah.
Um,
All right.
So now, in terms of seat totals, if I go in the same order I went for my percentages, starting with the NDP,
Yep.
I think they'll be efficient. So I think they'll only have 7%, but I do think they'll be efficient. So I do think they'll be able to get, with that 7%, I'm going with 11 seats. So for 7%, I think
Just
that's
under official party status.
yeah. We're gonna say they're gonna have tried really hard, but it's not. It's gonna be close, but no cigar. I think so. 11 seats for the NDP.
All right, let's go party by party. Let's go party by
Okay,
party.
you want to say your NDP prediction then?
Yeah. Because I had the NDP at 1 higher percent in the popular vote than you did, and I think that that's good for an additional 2 seats. So I have the NDP at 13 seats, just over what they need to get that 12 for official party status.
Okay, so some wishful thinking.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, you're not like an NDP partisan, so.
not at this point in my life.
And then okay, so then let's do Bloc because they'll probably be the next.
Do you have any for the Greens?
Oh yeah, I'm gonna go 2 seats. I think the Greens hold their 2 seats. I think they're putting every single resource they have into those 2 seats. What we've seen in the past is the Greens do tend to hold seats that they have. It happened in the Ontario election. You know, they lost Manly's seat, but I do think they will hold Kitchener and Saanich.
Yeah, I agree. We both have them at 2.
Okay, so then with the Bloc, I'm going to say that the Bloc will get 24 seats is my Bloc number. I don't know if they'll come back down to earth. I actually think they might like keep at this trajectory where they're currently looking at. What do you have for the Bloc?
It's interesting because even though I'm saying I think that in like the percentage, the popular vote, they might come back down a little bit. I think in terms of their vote efficiency, I actually give the Bloc more credit for vote efficiency than some others do. I think in the past they've proven to be able to achieve that quite well in like close
Right, like
three-way
if what
splits. They can,
in Montreal, like if in Montreal
yeah,
they get like really like no one in Montreal is voting for the Bloc, it's like it doesn't that will bring their overall percent down, but they could still,
yeah.
win close races
Exactly.
and win.
So I have them at 25.
Okay. So that brings us to the Conservatives, who I'm going to say they're gonna outperform the current like prediction. So like Poll Tracker has them at 123, and I think 338 has them at 125. I'm gonna put them at 131. That's my prediction.
131. So, okay. All right. What does Poll Tracker have them at? 123.
123, yeah.
And 338 has them at 125.
Yeah.
So I promise I did not look when I was doing my calculations. I was looking at like polling and stuff. I did not look at individually what they had in that way. But I have them smack dab in the middle. I have the Conservatives at 124.
Okay. So that leaves the Liberals, which by my count, what is what's the new number? It's 343 seats.
343.
Right?
343.
Yeah, so 343. I have them at 175, just hitting that majority, a slim majority, and it will cause complete chaos in the.
Won't that be a fun 4 years for us?
But I do think also the conservative supporters, the really entrenched conservative supporters, are going to be pissed, and it's not going to be good, and it's going to devolve into some extremism. So, but I do have them at 175. So
You have them at 175, and if people have been keeping track, I, of course, have them at 179. So I have them with a slightly more comfortable majority, but I would say like that's only a 7-seat majority. That's probably still lots of chaos in the House going on. I think that probably my numbers that give the NDP official party status would probably help make for a slightly more stable government going forward. But I think that where we're both kind of at feels right at this point. It feels like they might hover right around that 172 mark that makes a majority.
yeah, so a bit lower than what current aggregates are predicting, like just a touch lower for the Liberals, a touch higher for
I
in
think
my
both of us I think both of us look at the Ontario results and the NDP vote efficiency and go both 338 and Poll Tracker I think are underestimating the NDP's vote efficiency. I think that if we're looking at those 13 seats, the bulk are probably in BC. And you're 11, I would assume that this is also the case for. The bulk are probably in BC. But as I was coming up with my numbers, I still had Hamilton Center, Windsor West, and London Fanshawe going NDP. Winnipeg Center, I think, probably goes NDP still. Edmonton Strathcona still goes NDP. And then, there's a couple in there that probably also are pretty marginal as we come down to it. So those are our predictions. We'll find out on the 28th whether we're right or wrong. And that'll be a fun thing to go over in next week's results episode. Now we come to winners and losers.
Yep.
Isaac, who was your loser of the week?
My loser of the week is Stephen Harper, because he looks awful in that ad. No, but
He looks really bad.
his face looks like it's like a plaster. No, but I do think I don't think he has the pull the conservatives think he still has. I don't think he's their winning ticket, and I think his era of influence might be on its way out. That's what happens as politicians get older. The electorate shifts, and the young people right now who are really supporting the conservatives, the young men who are really supporting the conservatives, none of them were voting for Harper. A lot of them don't even probably remember anything about Harper. I don't think it really appeals to their current situation and their new makeup of their support. I know they're trying to use him to win back some of their old support, but I think his era of influence is slowly diminishing. So yeah,
I agree. All right. My loser is Jagmeet Singh. This was not the NDP's campaign. This was not the campaign that anyone in the NDP thought they were going to get to run, similar to all of the other parties. Jagmeet Singh is very likely to lose his own seat in the election. If he wins it, it'll be a barely wins it. He's going to lose somewhere around half of his caucus in an optimistic scenario. And he just hasn't performed well in this election. And I think that he made a really large strategic blunder by not defeating the government in the fall. I think that had he defeated the government in the fall, it's very likely that we'd be heading towards an NDP. We currently have an NDP official opposition again in Canada. And I think the fact that that didn't happen is squarely on Jagmeet's shoulders. I know for a fact that there were members of the caucus who wanted to defeat the government in the fall. I also know for a fact there were members of the caucus that didn't, and so he was having to wipe that to walk that tightrope. But overall, this is probably the end of Jagmeet's political career. This was the last campaign he'll run, and it will be a failure. And so, for that reason, he's my loser of the week.
And I think he's
Winners.
the only.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
One point on Jagmeet. I think he's the only one we can definitively say right now. The only leader we can definitively say right now is going to lose his leadership position. The NDP historically has extremely low standards for like keeping someone on. You can do really bad and they'll still keep you on just because they're like, oh, well, people don't know them yet. They don't have good name recognition. We have to build the brand around them. We have to give them time to marinate with the public. Look at how long it took Jack Layton to get the support. They really give a long leash. I think Jagmeet, this will be his third election. And I think he's done. He's the only one we can definitively say right now with almost certainty is done. The other ones
Absolutely.
I can't. So now we can go on.
Now we can go on, and on that point, I will say in 2 or 3 weeks, depending on how things turn out and how much there is to go over, we're going to have a draft on who the next NDP leader will be. So if anyone has any suggestions or names they want to float out there, be sure to drop them in the comments.
Yeah, and if any of the other leaders are gone by that point too, we'll do the same. So my winner is advanced voting on holidays specifically. So and advanced voting in general. So just to go over some numbers, because I want to find a way to shoehorn this in, 7.3 million people voted in the advanced vote over the 4 days. Over 2 million people voted on Good Friday. So that, just to put that into perspective, 5.8 million people voted in the advanced vote in 2021. And if we're going to go on our advanced vote, over 40% of the total turnout in 2021 has now voted in this election. So there's definitely I think we can safely say there's going to be higher turnout in this election. And by any indication, I think this shows, on the Good Friday, that had the biggest turnout of any of the 4 days, including the Saturday and the Sunday. It's a day where most people are going to have a holiday. Yes, of course, there's still some workers who work on statutory holidays, but less so than on an average weekend day, like less so than on your average Saturday. And I think it shows that we should be making federal holidays for voting on election day, because look what happens when you have one on the advanced voting days. That's my winner for the week.
All right. My winner for the week is a slightly sarcastic nod to the Conservative Party War Room for actually persuading Pierre Poilievre to do something to pivot this election campaign. Because for weeks and weeks and weeks, it was looking like this was not going to happen. Whether the ads we talked about are successful or not, I think we can both agree that they were not the closing arguments ads that Pierre Poilievre wanted to run. Somebody tied him down and put duct tape over his mouth for the 24 hours it took to shoot those ads. And I want to give a sincere tip of the hat to whoever that was, because it kept all of us from having to hear the doldrum tones of Pierre Poilievre coming out of our TVs every other minute in commercial breaks. And it also may have helped them do what they needed to do to gain back some of their support. So that is my slightly sarcastic, but still true winner for this week.
Nice. So we didn't even
go over
them before. I had no matchup, so that's good.
Nope. Yeah. So we're now gonna go out on our brief final message. So I'm going to quote here from Pope Francis's final statement. There can be no peace without freedom of religion, freedom of thought, freedom of expression, and respect for the views of others. Nor is peace possible without true disarmament. The requirement that people provide for its own defense must not turn into a race to rearmament. The light of Easter impels us to break down the barriers that create division and are fraught with grave political and economic consequences. It impels us to care for one another, to increase our mutual solidarity, and to work for the integral development of each human person. During this time, let us not fail to assist the people of Myanmar, plagued by long years of armed conflict, who, with courage and patience, are dealing with the aftermath of the devastating earthquake in Saigon, which caused the death of thousands and great suffering for the many survivors, including orphans and the elderly. We pray for the victims and their loved ones, and we heartily thank all the generous volunteers carrying out the relief operations. The announcement of a ceasefire by various actors in the country is a sign of hope for the whole of Myanmar. I appeal to all those in positions of political responsibility in our world, not to yield to the logic of fear, which only leads to isolation from others, but rather to use the resources available to help the needy, to fight hunger, and encourage initiatives that promote development. These are the weapons of peace, weapons that build the future instead of sowing seeds of death. May the principle of humanity never fail to be the hallmark of our daily actions. In the face of the cruelty of conflicts that involve defenseless civilians and attack schools, hospitals, and humanitarian workers, we cannot allow ourselves to forget that it is not targets that are struck, but persons, each possessed of a soul and human dignity. Those are the
Thank
final
you.
words of Pope Francis. Thank you very much. Have a great week, and we'll see you in the aftermath of the election. Go get some power and use it. Bye.